Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart Healing Conversations with Dawn and Janna, a place where we normalize all those painful emotions, transitions, loss, and grief that we experience, and sometimes don't know what to do with those feelings. And we try and push them down, but we are here to share, some of our experiences, some of our tools, and ways to help you through these difficult times in life. And today, we want to start by saying happy birthday to Janna.
Thank you.
And also congratulations. So Janna became a published author. She co-authored a book, Embers to Wings, that came out last week. You want to show us there we go.
No.
And it made it to #1 bestseller in many categories, I believe, right?
International even.
Awesome. That is really
Yep.
exciting. Well, I know you and I have talked for some time about you writing a book, being a part of a book, and having been an author myself of many books, I think, co-authoring a book is a great way to start. But it's really scary to put yourself out there. And so I kind of want to talk about this because this is a book that is about healing. And, all these women's stories are about something that they went through in life and how they were able to rise above it. And so I kind of want you to share your story of, how you got to a place where you felt comfortable enough, where you had the courage to write your story for this book.
Yeah, and actually the book Women's Soul Stories of Remembering, Reclaiming, and Rising. So it's kind
Mhm.
of a great book for anybody who's currently kind of in the yuck and not sure how to get out, as well as for those that are going through something or even on the other side, kind of looking back at the ugly, saying, wow, look at what I've been through. It's really written from everybody's hearts on their stories of trying to help so many others see that they're not alone and
Mhm.
they too can rise out of whatever it is they're in, that there's always somebody here to help. For me personally, it's taken, let's see, it's been now what, 2.5 years that I've been on this personal healing journey. um, Starting in, working one-on-one, trying to heal a lot of the things that had hurt me over the years, and it's really taking a lot more, I guess, personal work, day-to-day work of, journaling, reading, um, actual intentional time out for myself, whether it be listening to music, going to the beach, getting outside, just something to absolutely nourish myself so that I could get past a lot of the anxiety and depression issues. Um, because I didn't want to have to go and be on medication. That's not to say, that medication is not helpful. My personal story, I was on it for a while and I got to where I was kind of addicted to that numbing feeling that it gave me. Um,
Mhm.
I would start feeling of emotions again and I would call the doctor and say, it's not really working as well anymore. And so they would just up your dose. And I constantly started feeling that high, that addiction to the lack of feelings. And I knew with having kids that that's not how I wanted to be, was living completely emotionally numb, not recognizing joy and stuff, especially for them. And so I, took myself off of it and I swore that I would find some way to do this without having to have, medication. And I can't lie and say that, it's been easy. It's been a lot of really hard work. And even where I am today, um, there's still bad days. There's still days where you just want to crawl in a hole and like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just here listening to music. Leave me alone. And that's
Mhm.
okay. I think the biggest thing was recognizing that it's absolutely okay to have those bad days and allowing myself to do so, knowing that tomorrow will come out better. Um, Again, like I said, it's been about 2.5 years of a lot of that hard daily work, diving into other self-help groups that are online, just finding a circle of women that were also going through a lot of things in their lives, not necessarily the same, but recognizing that we could get together and at least vent, breathe, and just recognize that, I'm not alone in that I'm hurting, and it's natural and it's okay. And
Mhm.
so it took a lot of courage to get to the point where I could see this as an option and say, well, yeah, maybe I could actually do this, because I didn't have a lot of faith in myself. Writing has always been something I wanted to do, but I'd honestly kind of forgotten about it because I hadn't been dreaming or thinking of things that were only for me. So when this opportunity came up, the first thing that I saw, of course, was just this cover. And as soon as I saw the cover, I was like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I need to be a
Mhm.
part of it. I didn't know what I was going to write. I had no idea. I knew it would probably be something on my healing journey. I just had no idea at first. So I signed up for it. And then I kind of just spent a lot of time sitting in it, wondering, what should I write? I wanted to have faith that what was supposed to come out would just come to me naturally and it would be there. And it did. And my story is actually called A Sacred Space for Healing. Yeah. And that's kind of what I try to help everybody else with, is understanding that you can create your own sacred place for yourself to heal. And what you decide as healing for you is absolutely okay. And do that. Do all the things that you decide is okay. Not to listen to what the outside world says about how you should do it or you're doing it wrong. Um, One of the big things that came to me, especially after I wrote my story down and turned it in, all the self doubts kick in with, oh my gosh, I said the wrong thing. That shouldn't have been in writing. Like, people are going to get mad. They're going to get upset. And then it's, talk yourself down again. Like, no, this is what you were meant for. This is what felt right. Why not share it with the world? Like, just because my thoughts or beliefs or the way that I healed is differently from you doesn't necessarily mean that I did something wrong. It just means that I healed a little differently than you would choose to heal. And that's what I love about this opportunity and this book, is that it truly has in itself helped more on the healing process by teaching me a lot of those lessons of, it's okay to let those feelings and thoughts go of, I'm not enough or I'm not okay, because I do it different.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. There, there's such a healing power in writing. It's so therapeutic. So it's not just that we're writing for the reader, it's also we're writing because it's healing to ourselves. And there's something that you had addressed in your chapter about fears, and you had listed your fears. My fears of illness for myself and my family, my fears of failure, my fears of all the things left unsaid or undone, my fears of everything this life had thrown at me without offering me even the slightest sign of condolence. And, with grief, with any loss and transition, there comes a great deal of fear because we find
Yes.
ourselves in these circumstances that we don't know how to manage, whether it's we don't know how to manage them physically or mentally, emotionally. And it creates these new fears and these new belief systems. And for a long time, we end up living under those new belief systems. And they keep us stuck. They keep us small. They keep us from living the life that we deserve. And it really is, when we dig in and do that healing work, however we do it, whether, do it with a grief recovery method or therapy or whatever it is, until we do that, we tend to stay stuck in those fears. And so I love that you address that in your book, um, that you had to look at those fears and you had to let them go. But then on the backside, when we let go of things, whether it's grief or it's fear or beliefs that are no longer serving us, we have to fill ourselves back up, which is what you also talked about, is those thoughts of attraction. that abundance,
Yeah,
those things that we want in our lives, because, we can heal and heal and heal and heal and heal, but all that stuff that we're letting go of has a place in our heart, has a place in our mind. We have to fill it up with something else. And so what do we choose to fill it up with? Most of us aren't taught, well, okay, let's focus on, what we want to bring into our life. And it's such an important part of the process of healing is to create a new vision for our life moving forward. And I think that you did that with this chapter in this book that I know people all over the world will read, and it will help them see that there is a different way to live in their life.
absolutely. Fear, honestly, is what took me into that anxiety spiral down. Um, I never used to be that fear-ridden person. I'd look at anything and challenge it, like, oh, sure, you think you can control me? Let's try that again, right? That wasn't who I was. And so getting down to where everything controlled me, and it was really the lack of control that I had that was causing so many problems because I felt that I should be able to control all the outcomes. And it's
Mhm.
impossible. But being able to actually let go of that feeling and knowing that you don't have that much control is so powerful. It's a very hard step, too. So I always challenge people, even when you're down in those dark spaces and you don't feel like you can come out, it literally just takes that one small step of one positive thing or one reaching out to somebody saying, hey, I need help, or hey, I'm
Mhm.
having a rough day. Can you help me with this? Just one small step is all it takes moving forward. And just like in a dance, there's also steps backwards, but that still doesn't mean you're falling completely back. You can still continue forward.
Oh, I agree. It's like we talked about during our last episode was healing isn't a one and done. We don't just do this and we're good for life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's okay, well, now something else has come up, so I need to take a look at that. I need to take a look at why I'm having this reaction to whatever is happening in my life. And for those of us that have either grown up in a environment in which there were things that were going on that were out of our control, like for me, it was addiction, and then it was an abusive relationship in my teenage years. Like we want some control because we know how horrible it feels to not have any and for someone else to be affecting our lives in a way that feels painful. And so, as we move forward in life and we have other things happen, like you've had circumstances in your own life that were out of your control, we start to fear that lack of control. Like, if I don't have control, something bad is going to happen. And, it's really important to pause, be like, okay, well, something bad has happened in the past, but that was the past. But I can't control everything. There's no way I can control everything in my life. I can only control myself. And so, on one hand, that feels really scary. But on the other hand, if we can take back our power and remember we do have control over ourselves, we have control over our actions and um, our thoughts and how we choose to respond to things, that does feel a little bit empowering, especially in times where we feel disempowered.
Yeah, there was something I had read recently. I don't even remember what it is. I want to say it's like 90-ish% or something of the things that we typically worry about and fear so much that really never come to fruition. So we're
Mm,
spending so much time and energy in fear and upset about things that are never going to happen anyway. And so sometimes it's that simple switch of, well, I'm afraid this might happen. Well, yeah, but what if that doesn't happen? What if something
right.
good actually happens in its place versus something bad? And just being able to switch it just a little bit kind of takes the stress off of your body too. You can kind of feel that little bit of release, like, oh, maybe it'll be okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I was just looking at your chapter again because I wanted to remember. So you had asked a question, who will I be without this part of me? And I think so
Mm,
many of us that grow through some really difficult circumstances, well, let's be 100% honest. We all have difficult things that we experience in our lives, right? Um, we just don't always know how to navigate them. And so we've all gone through them, and it's easy to latch onto them like this is my identity. And you and I have talked about this quite a bit, is that we can become that divorced parent,
mhm.
that parent that lost a child, that daughter that grew up in an alcoholic home, whatever it is, we can take on that identity. But I love the question that you posed, is what will I be without this part of me? Like letting it go, right? Like, yes,
Mhm.
it's still part of me, but it doesn't have to be my identity. And I can rise above this. I can develop those wings.
Yeah, it's just a very powerful question for me because it's one I've had with many clients even because they don't think of that. They're just like I really don't know who I would be without this as who I am defined. It's like, but you don't have to know the answer to it. There doesn't have to be a written answer of, well, I'd be, this published author, I'd be, all these big things. That's
Mhm.
not necessary. All you have to do is find something else to grab a hold of. I would be happy. I would be joyful. I would be enjoying a day at the beach. It can be small baby steps as well. And then when you get to where you're feeling that more happiness and more joy, then it might be, well, yeah, maybe I will start writing, or maybe I will start my own business, or maybe I'll take that new job. There's so many other possibilities that pop in once you say yes to yourself that first time.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And it brings up just something for me, is that so when I got divorced at the age of 30, which was many years ago, my life felt like it was over. And I remember going to a therapist, and he said, well, who are you? What do you like to do? And I literally said, I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
a mom, I am a nurse, and I'm a wife. It's like, well, what else are
Yeah.
you? Those are roles you play. And I didn't know. And it took
Yeah.
my divorce to really figure out who I was. I ended up going and doing some medical mission trips to underdeveloped countries where we did surgery on children that would have never been able to
Mm.
access that care otherwise. I started just branching out. I started hiking. That was something I'd never done before. I started figuring out who I was, but if that divorce hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have figured it out because I was playing all those rules. And so it is, giving up that control of, you know, I want things to be a certain way. Well, maybe things are supposed to just develop differently. Maybe it's time for you to find yourself. And this comes at a really great time to talk about this because I just spent 3 days with my ex-husband because our son's wife was graduating from her master's program. And so there was a big family thing, and we all stayed together, and it was just a wonderful experience. And, people often ask me, how do I know I'm healed from some experience they've had? And my answer is when it doesn't push any buttons anymore, when there's no triggers. I spent 3 days with my ex-husband. We had wonderful conversations. We caught up on our lives. We talked about the past. We talked about family members, friends. And it was just
Mhm.
lovely. It was lovely. There was no tension there. And that is, for me, a great example of being healed from that one thing that
Yes.
happened in my life because there was no stress. And so I think it's,
Mhm.
really important for everyone to hear that when you get to that point where you can interact with someone or you can just move on with your life and you don't feel like every time you think about a situation or a person, it causes pain, you're healed.
Mhm. Yeah. I think another good thing on our healing journeys for this too is it opens up our time to dream again. I know
Yes.
personally that's one thing in my life that I cut off really quick was the ability to dream because I didn't feel worthy. And that's one thing this has taught me is Absolutely. It's okay to go back to those 16-year-old you dreams of like being an author or driving a boat
Yes.
for, whatever it is. This is the time. Find that joy,
Mhm.
find what's going to make you happy, and dream it again. That's absolutely okay.
Exactly. I mean, we all need to feel passion in our lives. We need to feel like we can have dreams out there, that are bigger than what we're currently experiencing. And I know I talk about this all the time, but I'd like to really people to understand that just because your story up to this point has been filled with pain does not mean the rest of it will be. There's chapters
Yes,
of all of our lives. We all have messy chapters. We all have painful chapters. But future chapters can be filled with joy and having our dreams come true and creating the life that we just really thrive in. It doesn't have to be a continuation of the past.
absolutely.
So before we end, I mean, I'm going to put in the show description a link to the book because I really
Okay.
would love people to get a copy and to read your story and other people's stories. But what is one message you really want people to take from your story in the book?
I think my biggest message is follow your heart. Often we get way too stuck in our head and we get away from what our body is truly telling us. And again, if it's just that one little small step that's speaking out to you, like, what you guys are talking about really hits home. You know what? Reach out. Let's have a conversation because that is your heart telling you, I need to take a next step and help myself somehow. Even if it's not with us, and like you said, with a therapist or whatever system you choose to use, listen to your hearts and take that next step in whatever it is that your heart desires for you.
Mhm. I love that message. Well, Janna, thank you for sharing your story and congratulations again. I'm really excited for you and happy birthday.
Thank you again.
Yep. All right, friends, we'll see you next week for another episode of
Bye,
Heart Healing
guys.
Conversations. Bye bye.